I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?
Welcome to Bound for Glory on SYN, the only AFL show on SYN. We got a big show this week covering all of yesterday's and Friday night's footy, as well as previewing the rest of the games. We've got an interview with Anthony Koutafidis, the Carlton legend, and we've also got a Brownlow chat. We've got our Brownlow expert in the room, so we'll be taking an in-depth look at that. First, we'll introduce the panel. My name's Ethan.
I'm Ashley.
I'm Ben.
I'm Joe.
I'm Damon. Sorry, just cutting over the top there.
Maximum coordination, of course. But just like North yesterday.
Speaking of coordination, oh goodness, what more can you say? It just keeps happening.
It keeps happening again and again. I mean, we looked through just before the show started. Of course, it's happened in 2011 and 12 as well. But you know, it's really going full steam ahead. North, of course, you know, losing these big leads. Yesterday it was 33 points.
32, I think it was.
There's 33.
33, and
at
they
the 20-minute mark of the third quarter this time.
I don't know where to start.
Well, why don't we start with having a bit of a look at what's happened in the past, Ben?
Okay.
You've got some stats there.
I spent this morning researching because I felt as if, you know, I had to relive the memories all over again. Essentially, this year, North Melbourne have nearly in almost all their losses been at some point in front.
Well into the game, of course.
Well into the game.
Good margins as well.
I think the first game, the first one we'll get out of the way first. It was Collingwood in round one. They're up by 11, 20-minute mark of the second quarter. 2 goals isn't much, but they had momentum in the game. They missed a few shots they should have kicked, and they let Collingwood kick some pretty easy goals through the corridor. Round 2 against Geelong, which is the biggest one. That was 41 points at the 22nd minute mark of the second quarter. Again, disaster. Sydney, they were in front by 20 points midway through the second, 15 minutes into the second quarter now. Again, Sydney, quality side, but again, they let Sydney kick 11 goals in the third quarter. They didn't stop. They didn't seem to prevent, you know, prevent the onslaught. There was just, it just rolled over and died. Against Hawthorn, they were 9 points in front after being behind for most of the game. At the 8th minute of the last quarter, which Hawthorn, they to their credit, rose again. They're a quality side, and I won't hold that against North Melbourne. Now, this is one that North Melbourne won, but if this game went for 2 more minutes, we wouldn't be talking. It wouldn't be a North Melbourne win. Port Adelaide, they were 39 points in front against Port Adelaide into the first minute of the second quarter. They won the game by 10 points. Port came at them in the second. You know, North, you know, they readjusted, and then they got out again to a 27-point lead start of the last quarter. Then Port came again. If this game went for 2 more minutes, North Melbourne would have lost.
And you could see that game as well. North Melbourne were just buying their time out. You know, they knew what was going to happen. They were just waiting for the siren to go, basically.
Yeah, it's sad we're this far down the list of it, and we're not even halfway there. Let's keep going. West Coast, 16 points in front, 15 minutes into the last quarter. Obviously, that loss and marked by Nick Naitanui.
Yeah, the Nick Naitanui.
Pete, wipe that smile off your face. I know you're enjoying it.
I was going to say the umpire gate.
Nah. You shouldn't be putting yourself in that position in the first place. Adelaide, 39 points in front, 6 minutes into the second quarter.
That was probably the funniest, I think, out of a lot. Because I wasn't expecting it.
Well,
goal after goal.
Which one would be the funniest? If I had to remove, obviously, my personal leanings, which one would be the funniest? It'd probably be that one. It'd be that one or probably the Hawthorn one. Because, yeah, you thought it was over the line and then it just sort of all fall apart.
Well, North were up by 5 goals, you know, halfway through the last quarter, and then Adelaide got a run on, and you knew what was going to happen before it happened.
Yeah. And I'll get back to that because that's something I want to touch on. Gold Coast, 32 points in front, 1 minute into the second quarter. Lost. Then last night, 33 points in front, 20 minutes into the third quarter against the Brisbane Lions. They lost. And as you just said, Ethan, it's almost as if you can see it happening before it happens. I think that's the most disturbing thing about it, that even when North Melbourne are playing positive football, if they give away a mark in the corridor, or you can see players, obviously not having an organised system or not following what seem to be questionable instructions in the first place, it falls apart, and you can see it falling apart before it happens.
To be fair to North Melbourne, though, of those games, how many were they coming in expecting to win? I don't think they would have come in expecting to win the Collingwood one, the Geelong one, the Sydney one, the Hawthorn one, and probably
the Brisbane one.
The Gold Coast one.
So
the Adelaide one.
No, but to be fair, how many have they actually gone in, being favourites?
3 of the 5. Sorry, 3 of the 8.
Well, there you go. So maybe it's not necessarily North, even though it looks bad on North, maybe it's not necessarily North Melbourne, maybe it's these better teams just picking up their game and getting over the top of them and exploiting North Melbourne's bad parts.
I just think they get complacent, really. I think they get really, really complacent. I know there was one goal that I think Ash McGrath kicked in the third quarter where I noticed, when it was being kicked inside 50, there were 3 North players on the wing and, 3 Brisbane players, almost on their own. They were all goal side, by a couple of metres each, and Pierce Hanley was on his own, and Ash McGrath took an uncontested mark, 15 metres out. I really don't think North run hard the other way. I think, that's something Brad Scott really needs to work on, because, running forward, we've seen them running waves. We saw that last week against Richmond, that, when they've got the ball and they're using it well, they are almost unstoppable. They can match the best teams in the league, but, doing it the other way, I'm not sold on them, and that's what's going to cost them places in finals, and that's what costs them close games, basically.
I just want to know what Brad Scott seeks to do differently, because you just see the same thing every week. There's no centre bounce rotations. North Melbourne conceded something like, don't know the exact figure, but I know the ballpark. It was something like 14 inside 50s they conceded in that second half. And most of those were taken out of the middle. Brisbane did not have their 2 best clearance players in the team last night. They had no Maloney, they had no Simon Black. And look, Cunnington didn't play a bad game. Harvey played well. Greenwood played well. Swallow was held, but he did okay. Zeeble, when he could, put his head over the ball, but he copped a knock, so he's excused. If these guys, when they usually play well, and the midfield dominates, why don't North win? Why? What happens? Why is there something so faulted with the way Scott sets up that North can still win the midfield, they can still win all the key indicators, but they can't win the game? And it's not just once; it's happened numerous times over. We noted down 3 occasions in which it happened. In 2012 against Essendon, Port Adelaide and West Coast, and in 2011 it happened against West Coast, Richmond and Sydney. Why does this keep happening? I can't go much further than say something is greatly flawed in the way North set up.
As much as I love Boomer, he was the highest possession getter on the ground at 35 years of age. With you've got the likes of Cunnington, Zeeble, McMillan, Attlee, Greenwood. You'd think one of them would step up, but it's always Boomer and Wells and Petrie.
Well, you're right. I think there's that, but Harvey runs around and is getting loose ball. The ball that Cunnington, Zeeble and Greenwood get is the ball that's inside. If they do that job, then the rest should look after itself. Harvey should be doing that, and you've got other. I'd say more that's on players like Jamie McMillan. I don't want to say Brad McKenzie, he's too young. Sean Attlee, Mullet's excused because he got a knock on his ankle. It keeps happening, and that's why it's so infuriating. You see the same setups every week, and there's no variation.
And there's no real depth to it. Like players you mentioned, like McMillan and Attlee, I mean, they're good players, they're good young players, and they'll carve out good careers, but, they don't really attend very many centre bounces. I think, equal players like that, like as you said, Mullet, he's pushing up to the wing more so. These players, they don't start at centre bounces, and, when players like Cunnington and Swallow, they don't have their best games. There's no plan B. There's nothing to fall back on, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Look, there's no centre bounce rotations, and as you say, like if Cunnington or Zeebel's having a bad game, it's and it looks as if. And what I don't get is, why wouldn't you slow the game down? North Melbourne are an offensive side. They can kick big scores, but they obviously have defensive issues. What I don't understand is they were 5 goals up. They let Brisbane kick 3 goals in that last 4 minutes. Why does Brad Scott not try and kill it? Try and say, no, we're not going to concede any more goals. Any coach, like a Malthouse or even Buckley on Friday night, was losing it every time they conceded a late goal. And that was just 1 late goal. That wasn't 3 or 4 like North did. Why isn't there an emphasis on that sort of thing? That's what I don't understand, on killing the game. And we've sort of seen bits of it with North, just chipping it around and trying to slow it down, but it just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. And I'm just at a loss why.
I think, to be fair, I mean, this doesn't excuse anyone entirely, but I think Lockie Hansen going down 2 minutes into the game, I think not even, he's been such an important player down back. He comes off his man, and we've seen games against West Coast and last week against Richmond where he plucks everything. He drops in front of forwards, he outmarks them. When he goes down the second minute, they lose a lot of their structure. But you're right. It doesn't save North in that. There should be an option to fall back on. I know they've got a lot of quality tall players. I mean, even with 10 minutes to go and Brisbane, it's obvious what's going to happen. Even just chucking someone like Drew Petrie down back, who we know he's played well down there before. It's just I don't really know, to be honest.
The funny thing with North is they play Carlton next week on Friday night, and who knows, they'll win.
That'll be fast.
Yeah, and then we'll play Melbourne. If we choke against Melbourne, I think, there won't be any North Melbourne supporters alive. That's
the ones that are left.
Yeah, the ones that are left. But going on the Blues, they did have a good win against St Kilda last night.
They did. It was good to see Chris Judd up and about last night. I haven't seen him really having a great impact on the game as of late, but it was good to see the Blues get a win, and also it was Milne and Rewalt that came back into the game for the Saints last night, and they did definitely have an impact on the Saints lineup and gave them that forward versatility.
I think as good as it was to see Chris Judd, up and about, back in his best form, I think it was even better to see Lockie Henderson plucking everything.
Lockie Henderson was fantastic.
He took 7 contested marks, which I think that's up there for records in the recent history. That 6 marks inside 50, and with weight out, someone needed to step up because Casbolt, he's taking marks, but he's not converting them to goals. Rose in and out of the side, and he did take a good mark yesterday. I don't know how many goals he kicked, but he played over
3. Yeah,
he kicked 3. So there we go. And having someone like Henderson filling the void, and it's really good to see that they can replace these players, because when weight goes down, we know how good a forward he is. They've got these tall forwards, but they don't seem to fill the void. So seeing Henderson kick 4 last night was fantastic.
I was just going to say with Henderson, I think he's more valuable up forward. Without weight there, we've got no one else, no other tall forwards, and Casbolt can't stand up, so we need him up forward, I think.
How did Watson and McInnes play? Because obviously, because you've moved Henderson forward, those two would be candidates to go back. Obviously, McInnes hurt himself against the Gold Coast last year in that awful game, which got Rattenzacked as well. How were they last night, and where do you see him at the end of the year, and where do you see him onwards from that?
I think Watson is pretty valuable. We saw last night that in his kickouts, he's a massive kick and torped it a couple of times. And
nearly hit the Etihad roof.
Yeah, ended up in the centre of the ground, and with his long kicking, he's really valuable like that. As well as his marking as well. I mean, he's still raw, but give him time, and I think he will come on. But at the moment, I think he deserves his spot in the side.
Yeah, for someone who's been sort of in and out this season, he was going so hard at the ball last night, and that was good to see. But a lot of the boys were going really hard at the ball last night, and there seemed to be a lot of raw emotion as well. There was quite a lot of fighting and a bit of tiffs. The emergency umpire got a pretty good run last night on the ground, so it was a lot of emotion running. I don't know whether that's something to do with the sort of rivalry between St Kilda and Carlton of late, or if it had something to do
The
with some of the other
one-sided
things.
rivalry.
Oh, yes.
That emergency umpire, I think, should be asking for a bit of extra pay.
He definitely earned his...
Oh, they'll all get a quick top up from that little push and shove.
Oh, yeah, from the TIFF, yeah.
Oh, there was a few.
From the Ryan
What's
Kelly
it-
Pinching Fund.
What's it considered now? 3 players pushing and shoving is now worth a wrestling fine.
Yeah.
Oh, $900.
What about 10? Because there was about 10 of them at one point.
Melee.
Someone's getting a really nice lunch at
That's-
AFL House this week.
It's a lot to pay
don't
for a
already.
wrestling match.
Tom Lee, obviously, was it his first game? I'm sorry if
That was
I'm
his fourth.
Whoops. Well, there you go. Obviously hasn't had that much of an impact so far. From what I saw, he leaded well, and I think that's what St Kilda needed. I think he's obviously something a lot of people weren't sure whether he was worth the... Well, that's the often criticism, that he wasn't worth the pick 12 that people...
No, it wasn't just pick 12.
It was also the untraded, yeah. How did he go, and how long do you think it'll take before he can cement that spot?
I think you'll see probably next year he'll start to cement it. I think... I'm not entirely sure, but I think there was a little bit of issue over his fitness, just getting it up to AFL standard. I'm not sure how much of a pre-season he actually had, and he didn't look very comfortable in the games that he played early in the year. He played a couple, and he came back against Freo, when Kaczynski went out, and he replaced him well. I think he kicked a couple of goals last week, and he kicked 3 yesterday. So, especially when Rewalt, he had plenty of the ball, but he kicked 1 goal 4, and you're not going to win a game when a forward's your best key forward's really impacting a game that to that extent. And having a foil like Tom Lee, especially on a Carlton backline which did have Henderson out down playing forward, and I think it's very good to see a young player stepping up and kicking goals like that. It's very promising for St Kilda's future.
Yeah, well, Tom Lee kicked 3, like you said. Rewalt kicked 1, and Milne kicked 2. So he was the most effective forward out of that lineup, which was good to see, especially for a young guy. And we should probably move on to the other game, which was...
It's on Friday night.
Collingwood and
Collingwood and
Adelaide. That's one.
It's only 2 days. Not even a day and a half. Come on, guys, 36 hours. But where do Adelaide go from here?
Oh, they play youth.
Next year.
Is it
Just
next
go
year,
straight to
or
next
is
year, I
it?
think.
Is it? Do they roll the dice and say, "Look, we can still make it"? Can they still make it?
where are
They
they on
can
points?
still make it. They're 6 and 9, so that leaves them in the group.
So equal with North, are they?
Equal with North and Brisbane. I think they'll be ahead
But
of them on
behind
percentage.
Carlton and West Coast.
So they're 11th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to make it from there. I think Sanderson will know that, yes, they still can mathematically make it. It's more than mathematically. They can still realistically make it. But, the footy they've been playing this year, they played 1 quarter. They played 1 real good quarter against Collingwood, and the rest was okay. They battled hard, and they really dropped off in the last quarter. And I don't think a team that makes finals will, does drop off like that. And especially conceding a lead, as considerable as it was in the first quarter. And I think Adelaide, they'll know that they can make finals. They'll still try and play their best footy, but I think, deep inside they'll be knowing, this ain't the year. I think we should look to 2014 a little bit.
Should look to Collingwood. They had a fantastic game on Friday night. Scott Pendlebury in particular, 42 disposals.
He's the best player to watch when he's up and about.
Oh, definitely.
The way he seems to stop time and space completely when he's got the footy is remarkable. And that second goal he kicked in the last quarter to finish off the game on his opposite foot from 50,
Off 2 steps.
was,
It didn't look like 2 steps, but it was 2 steps.
It looked like he was just chipping it to the top of the goal square, and it just carried through. And he is a remarkably good player. He's got awareness second to none in the league, I think, and he combine that with the ability to win his own footy and take marks, and I think he's second to Ablett in the league in terms of how much he impacts the game and how good he is.
He had, just looking at some of the stats here, he kicked 2 goals and was involved in 14 scores.
That's
Jesus.
I wish I had a
ridiculous.
Pendlebury there should be a Pendlebury in every team.
That's 14 out of 26 in total.
14 out of 26.
North Melbourne have an anti-Pendlebury. He's called Michael Ferrito. With Adelaide, next week they play Geelong at Amy, and that's going to be obviously a massive crunch game for them. Collingwood have... Next 2-3 weeks, is it still that I don't want to say easy run because in football you just don't know, but obviously a charmed run where they've got expansion teams. I think Gold Coast and then GWS.
GWS about 3 weeks' time, I think.
Again, I don't want to say because I don't think they've been playing good enough, but are they worthy if they made the top 4?
Well, I think, yeah, if you're good enough to make top 4 and you make top 4, then you're worthy. I mean, the footy they've played early in the year wasn't, definitely, but if they can catch up that ground and make top 4, I mean, it's going to be ridiculously difficult because, they've got Sydney, Freo and Essendon that they've all got to overtake, and it's going to be tough. But
if they played... Sorry.
But, if they do play good enough footy to actually make top 4, then, yeah, they definitely deserve it.
If Collingwood and obviously keep in mind that they've played average opposition the last couple of weeks, if they played Fremantle, Essendon and Hawthorn tomorrow, would they beat those teams?
Well, Freo they came close to, over in Pattinson's. Hawthorn they can't beat. And, sorry, who was the other one?
Essendon.
Essendon? Yeah, they would beat Essendon.
Collingwood supporter here, Pete's just written down the fixture for me pretty much. They face Gold Coast, GWS, so they're pretty much secure wins. Essendon will be a challenge. Sydney will definitely be a challenge. Hawthorn a challenge. West Coast will be challenging to make the 8, so I wouldn't write that one off. And then the Kangaroos, which we don't know how that one will go. So they definitely do have a tough run. So top 4...
I reckon 5. I reckon 5th. That'd be pretty good for Collingwood.
Yeah, they've got to overtake, one of Sydney, Collingwood. Sorry, not Collingwood. They've got to overtake one of Sydney, Freo, and Essendon. So it's going to be tough, and their draw probably could be easy. I think they didn't have the most favourable draw at the start of the year, so it's tough. But we'll see how they go.
I think with Collingwood, just quickly, they're that inconsistent of late. I think they really need the double chance because if they finish outside the top 4, they're going to be hard pressed to beat those sides that you said, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit hard for them, I think, unless they make the top 4.
But still, I think, with Ben Reid moving forward, I think Collingwood are so much better when he's up forward. And, Swan and Pendlebury are really starting to kick into gear. I don't think Swan was that great at the start of the year, and now he's really kicking on. And, we've seen the stat that, Collingwood have won 32, lost 4 when both of them have 30-plus disposals. I think, the fact that they've both had 30-plus 36 times is ridiculous in itself. And let alone winning all of them. So, I think, they got the personnel, we know that, and we'll just have to see how they go. But
I think on that note, we should go to some SYN messages and we'll talk about the rest of the games. Also, later we've got some chatter on the Brownlow and we'll also have an interview with Anthony Koutafidis, courtesy of the Sports Desk here on SYN. We'll be right back after these SYN messages.
Like what you hear? Get in on the action. Head to syn.org.au for more info. SYN Radio, where young people run the show.
Ain't nobody got time for that, but y'all got time for Panorama.
Panorama, current affairs for young people, by young people. 4:30 to 5 p.m. weekdays. On SYN.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Guess what? You're listening to SYN.
School's on air with Homeschooling College.
Quiz on air, cupcakes for all.
SYN Media Learning teaches media skills to young people all across Victoria.
Teach leadership and teamwork through radio.
Use digital media to build literacy.
Gain confidence through creative screen projects.
SYN Media Learning is a leader in school and community media education.
Find out more, head to syn.org.au/learn
or call 9925 4747.
You're back on Bound for Glory on SYN. If you've got a text us in on 0427 767 767. And up next we've got the game between the Hawks and Power.
Well, Port Adelaide were competitive early. I think, that's probably one of the things we were sort of expecting. They are 7th, 8th on the ladder, and I think it's one of those games that, they can really shock teams. They've beaten West Coast, they've beaten Collingwood at home, and it's a very dangerous place for an opposition team to travel. And I think, they could have come close, but we know how good Hawthorn are, and they really ran away with it in the third quarter, especially players like Gunston and Roughhead, who are really in fantastic form, filling the void that Lance Franklin left. And, once again, they ran away with a win.
Jared Roughhead is sensational form.
He's leading the Coleman at the moment.
And he's a second ruckman. Well, you consider it's that weird modern role in which you've got a forward who has to be obviously mobile enough to play in the ruck, and that's obviously just the way the game's gone.
And a 10 set of bounces, as a midfielder.
And he wins clearances too. He's such an influential footballer, and it's weird because we always look back and we say, and obviously I don't want to start some stupid comparison, but we always look at that draft and say, oh look, they got Franklin and then they got Roughhead
and Lewis as well.
But we knew ridiculous drafting in that year. But Roughhead is starting, and if Franklin goes, I think Roughhead and Gunston and some of the others of those small players like Savage and Smith who can bob up and take a mark, and Puopolo, I think that's enough for them. I think they'll be okay if Franklin were to leave with the way that they currently set up with Roughhead playing so well.
I think in the last 12 games without Lance Franklin, they've won 11, and most of those wins have been, 45 points plus. And we saw last year, especially when he went down with injury, players like Gunston was kicking 3 goals a game, Roughhead was kicking 3 goals a game, and they looked a much better side. I think, the presence that Franklin has is often a little bit overwhelming for other forwards. They see Buddy and they think, oh yeah, he's going to have a ping from 50, or we can't really lead for a ball if we know Franklin's behind us because we know how good a player he is. It almost, it does harm the delivery for the other forwards a little bit, and I think, they are a better side without Buddy. I think recent form does indicate that.
Just a stat on that, Hawthorn have kicked more than 110 points for the 10th time in a row without Lance Franklin.
That's pretty damn good without someone who's kicked 100 goals in a season.
I think about yesterday, Port Adelaide, their inexperience was shown, obviously by a side who's not only has experienced bodies, but they pressure and they set up really well. Hawthorn had 16 more tackles for the entire game, and Port had twice as many field turnovers as Hawthorn did. So it was sort of indicative of where the game went. I just think, a lot of people are saying Port Adelaide are playing, obviously they are playing well and they've improved immensely on last year, but I still don't think they're there yet to play a finals intensity. And if they were to travel, because if they were to fall into the 8, they'd probably finish 8th, and you'd travel.
Well,
and
you back them to finish 8th at the moment.
And who would finish 5th, 4th at this stage? They'd go Fremantle, maybe a Collingwood.
It's going to be one of Collingwood and Essendon,
or even
Freo,
Richmond.
Or even Richmond.
Yeah, and that's going to Melbourne or going to Perth. And
they don't want to do either of those.
Yeah, especially against sides who can provide such pressure. And we saw what Richmond did to them at home. And I just don't think if they went up against Fremantle in Perth that they'd stand up. But I think they're on the right track, and it's very good to see, and there's very positive signs coming out of Port Adelaide.
Well, to see where they've come from, especially, we know how bad their off-field situation was. Their on-field, I don't think it was, it was made out to be worse than it was. I think, there was a lot of promise there, and really a lot of young players. They're still the 3rd youngest team in the league, and that's ahead of the expansion side. So, for them to finish 8th would be a remarkable achievement, and the development of players like Chad Wingard, who deserves to be All-Australian. He should be locked in on a half-forward flank at the moment, and Ollie Wines slotting to the side very well, and Robbie Gray's come back in fantastic form, and Boak's even better than he was last year. So, these players are stepping up. They got a formidable midfield. They got good tall forwards, and they got a promising defence. So, they've got every aspect covered, and I think if they make finals, it won't be the last time for a few years.
Yeah, I think on Boak, he was one of those players who got criticised and said, you're entering that age where you should stand up. And yesterday, 34 touches, 13 of them contested, 20 handball receives. I think that just shows he's working harder. And a lot of Port players weren't doing that last year. And that's something obviously senior players and obviously the younger players have looked at that and gone, the standard has been lifted.
And I think they're also identifying more of, he can get 20 handball receives, that he is a player to get the footy to, because he does impact with the footy in his hand. He's a good long kick, he runs hard, and he had a couple of goal assists yesterday, along with a goal himself, and 7 inside 50s as well. So, he's a player that really, when he's on form, he really does lift Port Adelaide's midfield, and he's a very good player because of it.
Another player to mention as well is Brad Ebert. He's been really good this year. He racked up 27 posies and kicked a goal as well. So he's been really impressive, I think, along with Boak.
Yeah, I think just on that, I think we should move to the next game. I really didn't enjoy watching this, I'm going to be honest. This was a slop fest.
It was a slop fest in Geelong's forward half.
It was a world's sloppiest training drill. Yeah, it was just one of those games where you have to, sometimes, doing this, you have to sit through and you need to try and pull something from it, but I'm still struggling to figure out just what it was.
You could say Melbourne's 10 scoring shots from 19 inside 50s being as opportunistic as possible to make the scoreline flatter them a little bit.
I still don't understand what this game means in the context of anything. I'm not sure it means much, but would you say Melbourne, and I know they did play pretty poorly, and I know the conditions didn't really help, considering that they're not really a good ball-using team in the first place, but would you say that they did manage to get scores, and their last line defence was desperate, and it was probably better than it's ever been, really? And I know that's trying to pull it, really far concepts, but I think they were better than they probably would have been under Neil in those circumstances.
The thing is, though, honestly, what were Melbourne really thinking coming into this game? Obviously, they're going against a team that's premiership favourites. Probably people weren't expecting much from Melbourne, really. It was never going to be a close game. So for them to just get a score up there, to try a little bit, I think it's better than nothing, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think that was just sort of the major thing in all this. And as I said, the last line defence, the ball was always in Geelong's half. I think the stat is there somewhere.
It's 71%.
71%. And I just felt the Melbourne defence were... In other games, I've saw them sort of stay behind their opponents, sort of ball watch and get lost, but they were really on that ball, the last line of defence players, and they were desperate, and that's something all you can ask for. Now, obviously, everything else fell down in those conditions and under Geelong's pressure, but it's good to see that there was some desperation there, at least stop it from becoming that 100-point blowout.
Well, I think, back onto what you said, Ash, I think, Melbourne would have gone into the game looking at, their past 3 or 4 weeks saying, this is good form, I think we can realistically compete against Geelong. I think, I think they would have set a target of maybe keeping it under 10 goals, maybe, a 40-point loss. They can walk away from that in wet conditions. They would have been extremely happy with themselves because, they're an uncontested side, I think the conditions didn't really suit them. But I think walking away from that game, inside 50 differential record was broken, at least inside 50 record, since stats were recorded, that was broken as well. I think Neil Craig would have been very disappointed with that. In saying that, I think, when they did get it forward, I think, they were quite damaging, in the very limited opportunities they had. And their defence worked okay. I mean, to concede 71 inside 50s for 98, which is the first time they've conceded under 100 all year, that's a good sign. So, there's a bit of good with the bad, and I think, probably a better ratio of that than what we've seen earlier this year, especially.
As the only Demon supporter here, Ethan, were you surprised that James Magna didn't get a game yesterday? Perfect conditions, he's a good clearance player in the wet.
Well, what do you think? I mean, he gets 5 clearances a game and 20 touches, I think.
Yeah, I'm as surprised.
I think the answer speaks for itself, basically. Yeah. It's tough, though. I think, having a player like Jack Grimes, because Magna went on the main list for Grimes, and he's come back and, he played well yesterday. And I think, putting maybe Mitch Clark on ice for the rest of the year, letting his foot really heal up for 2014, I think, that would be a good idea because Magna's he's a good player. He's one of Melbourne's better midfielders, and that's where Melbourne fall down, the midfield. So I think any way to bolster that is going to be a positive.
I think, just talking about the dominance from Geelong, inside 50, they had 70 inside 50s, which is just massive, and of course, as we said, Melbourne only had the 19, but could have been much uglier and might have been a different outcome. And we might have been speaking about Melbourne again being much worse than what they are. And it may have been something more of a significant game than just being a nothing game.
I noted after the game that, it probably should have been a 100-point loss realistically when you concede that many inside 50s. I think the conditions helped them a little bit in that respect. Geelong didn't kick straight. They kicked 13 goals, 20. Steve Johnson had the ball on a string and he was, for 36, 37 disposals, he was relatively ineffective in that regard. And I think, the conditions helped them a little bit. I think it saved them a little bit of face. And I think, 68 points doesn't really reflect how one-sided it was for the majority of it.
Did you like Jimmy Tumpus's game? Because he was mostly behind the ball, and a lot of people were criticising, the typical, Melbourne's development, he's gone backwards from what he was in his draft year in the under-18s. How did you feel with him behind the ball? And he was very desperate, and I thought he was okay, but what did you see from him yesterday?
Well, I think one of the things that was, made of him when he was drafted was that, he wasn't just a midfielder. He could play off half-back, could play probably less so off half-forward, and I think, just getting the footy into his hands, I think, getting him maybe to follow the ball a little bit, or, putting him behind the ball so he does get a fair bit of it. And I think, still Nathan Jones and Matt Jones as well, both of them were running around behind the ball as well at some points, just, because that's where the footy was. But I think, getting the footy into his hands, because we know he's a good user, he's a very composed player, that's one of his standout features, and, it was a good game from him, sir.
Probably should move on to the other game that happened yesterday, the Tigers and Gold Coast. Now, Tigers finally got a win over the Gold Coast and broke the curse.
That almost happened.
Almost happened again?
Yeah, if that game went for 2 more minutes, the Suns would have won.
Carmichael Hunt.
Yeah, I think, in a way, I felt it was a little similar to the Port Adelaide Hawthorn game in that, again, field turnovers by the Suns from Richmond, pressure just sort of saw the result end the way it did. I thought the Suns were pretty wasteful. I like what's coming out of them. Shame that Rory Thompson's hurt himself, who's been utterly fantastic in defence for them, and yeah, good for Richmond finally getting a win up there.
I think both teams sort of suffered with the turnovers. Richmond scored 35 of their points from turnovers, and Gold Coast scored 34 of their points from turnovers. So it was relatively even, although Richmond didn't really kick straight. But both teams were turning it over, and it was probably a very highly competitive game.
Oh, Gold Coast more so, definitely. I think their delivery in the forward half was, it's probably as bad as I've seen it this year. I think Richmond were just mopping everything up. Their kicking wasn't great. I think the wind, it didn't help. I think we saw how much the ball was swinging around when Daniel Jackson was sliding goals from the pocket again. And I think, they suffered in the forward half, and Richmond, we know how well they set up behind the ball. Players like Troy Chaplin, he's been in fantastic form, and, they got a very good back line. They swept it up, and, it was just very good down back, and Gold Coast very poor up forward.
It reminded me of that awful crosswind. It was like, those PC golf games. It's just in one direction, you just got to aim it, on the fairway in one direction, and the ball would just fly. It was ridiculous, because I think players were lining up on the right hand of the screen. Sorry, right dial, you know what I'm saying. The I don't know which end it's called, but the right end of the telecast, and the ball would start about outside the right-hand goalpost, and it would end nearly out of bounds on the full on the other side, and you had to keep it low, otherwise it would have just flown off like it was in some sort of current. It was weird to watch.
And that goal from Jackson I mentioned earlier, he was about 45 metres out, 40 metres out on the opposite pocket, so he had the wind pushing it into goal. He just lobbed it up to the top of the goal square, and the wind did the rest of the work. So,
is there any other ground in the country that has that sort of violent breeze? Off the top of your heads?
I don't think so.
That's ask BT, he knows about the vortex, as he calls it.
What, the vortex in the pocket at Etihad Stadium where the roof's closed? Jesus, BT. Anyway, I think on that note we should go to some SYN messages. We'll be right back with our interview with Anthony Koutafidis.
Schools on Air with Homeschooling College.
Quiz on Air, cupcakes for all.
SYN Media Learning teaches media skills to young people all across Victoria.
Teach leadership and teamwork through radio.
Use digital media to build literacy.
Gain confidence through creative screen projects.
Sin Media Learning is a leader in school and community media education.
Find out more, head to syn.org.au/learn
or call 9925 4747.
Like what you hear? Get in on the action. Head to sin.org.au for more info. Sin Radio, where young people run the show.
You're back on Bound for Glory on Sin. Make sure you text us in your thoughts on 0427 767 767. Now we're going to go to an interview with Carlton legend Anthony Koutoufides.
Obviously, you've had a lot of great achievements over your footballing career. What would you say was probably your biggest highlight?
Biggest highlight by far would be the 95 premiership, no doubt about it. I mean, as a young kid, you dream of playing one AFL game, but then to win a premiership is just more than what I could have ever dreamt of. So that moment there, when you think of all the, the blood, sweat and tears you go through, that moment there's worth every little bit of it.
Now, obviously it's multicultural round this weekend, and there's been a lot of great players over the years. When you were a kid, did you have anyone that you really looked up to as a multicultural player that really inspired you?
I was Collingwood supporter, so Peter Dagos, no doubt. He was an absolute champion of the game, the most skillful guy I've ever seen. He was magical. So he was one. I mean, I loved all the Collingwood players, but no doubt Dagos was one of my favourites.
Now, like obviously Carlton's got a rich history of having European stars across its long history, and the supporter base has a lot of Italian and Greek influence throughout it. Do you think that sort of, I guess, a Carlton culture made it easier to deal with being a multicultural player in terms of things like racism on and off the field?
I'm not sure, because I was never really a part of any other club except for Carlton. Certainly the supporters embraced me, and they gave me a lot of support, and they were terrific towards me. So really I was pretty blessed in that sort of way, whether it was the Carlton culture or their past or their supporter base, I can never tell. But, all I know is that I had wonderful support from both the Greek community and the Italian community, because my mum's Italian, so the mixture of both. And, there was some terrific Italian and Greek players of the past from that also. And, of course, I had the privilege to play with one of my very good mates, James Christou, for the majority of my career too. And he's a Greek background also.
So, just on the thing of racism, I guess it's become pretty prominent in the AFL. I mean, it's always been a big issue. But did you experience any of that during your playing days, or was that not too bad?
Yeah, no, I experienced it. I don't know. I never really, thought too much about it. I just continued playing the game. So, I'm very proud of my heritage, and we're both, my parents were there from, and I'll always take that with me. And although there was some racism thrown towards me, I don't know, I'm sort of that guy. I just sort of move on from it.
Now, this is a bit of one from left field. If you could pick any current player, any current multicultural player, if you could start your own team and build a team around that one player, who do you think you would start with?
It's a good question. Zaharakis is probably the one, one of the players that is a standout, I think, at the moment. Terrific player for Essendon, good kid, and can certainly play footy.
If you, I guess you had a great thing in track and field as well. What influenced you to choose a career in AFL instead of track and field?
Well, look, it was a tough decision because I had a really good junior athletic career. Where at one stage, I was trained in high jump. I had this train record in the 110 metre hurdle, so I did quite well in athletics. I think the team environment and being part of that Carlton Football Club was probably what got me over the line, I think, because athletics is such an individual sport and very tough. If you get injured, you're basically on your own, but the team environment, you're all in it together. And once Carlton offered me that contract, it was just a very tough decision for me to make, but one decision I'm grateful that I did.
Now, you were recently appointed coach of the Under-16 World Team. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I'm still here now in northwest of Sydney, in Blacktown. They asked me late last year if I wanted to be part of it. And I really haven't had too many roles since finishing football, and I thought about it, and I guess what did inspire me was these guys are similar backgrounds to myself. Either parents born overseas or they were born overseas. So I felt like I could understand where they were coming from. And because of that, I've taken it on. And our journey's been unbelievable so far. On Sunday, we played North West WA and pretty much undefeated in this competition, and we beat them. And then we played South Pacific 2 days ago, and we beat them by 111 points. So it's been an outstanding team. The program seems to be getting better and better, and it's just really getting exposure to some of these kids who wouldn't be able to play at this sort of elite level, and so then they can understand what it takes for them to be able to make senior footy, and it just exposes them that little bit more to the recruiters, and maybe the recruiters can pinpoint a handful of these guys, and maybe hopefully that they can then move on and become AFL players.
Now, just going back to the multicultural thing, obviously you played against a lot of fantastic players, but who would you say who was the best multicultural that you played against and the best that you played with?
Hard to say. I mean, if I looked at the team that had just been picked, I played with quite a few of those players. I got Dakes towards the end of his career, but if you're talking about a star player, he'd probably have to be one of them. And play with him, and Silvani's the other one, isn't he? Tough and hard defender, one of the all-time greats at Carlton, a real important player in my time, and just did the job week in, week out with no complaining, and just went about it real hard and tough.
Now, this year, the AFLs, I think, I would say they've approached multicultural around, not half-heartedly, but they haven't done all they can to, I guess, really embrace the influence of other cultures. I mean, they've had the ads on the TV and various players on their Twitter account answering people's questions, but how do you think the AFL can, I guess, improve the approach to multicultural round and really, make sure that the message is going to kids that we should be embracing people from other cultures?
Yeah, look, it's an important one, because I reckon in order for this game to continue to move forward, we really do have to embrace all different nationalities and people that come from different parts around the world. And as our country becomes more and more multicultural, some of these guys are going to be absolute superstars of the game. And, I'm dealing with some of these African guys here who, athletic-wise, we know what they can do, and it's just a matter of them learning the game. So I'm assuming the next generation, if these younger African kids start playing the game at a younger age, they're going to become important. We wouldn't want to lose them to any other sport. So we really do have to embrace the fact that this game now, although it's a religion in Australia and we love it, and it is multicultural too. And these guys are going to be so important. Like you get your Magic Dons and Nick Natanui, they excite the crowds because they're different to what we've seen in the past. And that's what this game means. So we really do have to embrace it, and really do have to emphasise and make it a big focal point, like we do with our great Indigenous players. And I think that's wonderful what they do to them, to really respect them for what they've done for the game. I think now really the multicultural, these sort of guys too, we really do have to pump up.
All right, thanks very much for your time today, Kuda.
No worries, sure.
Some hilarious technical difficulties there, but we got there in the end. Thank you very much to the Sports Desk for that interview. Obviously, Jordan Cannell, who does work for both Bound for Glory and Sports Desk, doing that fantastic interview with Anthony Koutoufides. Now we're going to go to chat about, just briefly before we go into the preview of the games, the Brownlow. Damon is our resident expert.
I wouldn't say expert, I just follow it. But
resident expert.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, expert.
Yeah, if you want to run my
you know more than we do. That's enough to qualify as expert. In your eyes, you obviously have your own blog, and obviously you post these results on Bound for Glory News as well.
Which you should check out because they're very good articles.
Weekly wrap-ups.
You're just getting a big head there.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. We'll save the shameless plugs to the end. Damon, from what you can see so far, who is the leader at this stage, and who is the top 5 at the moment?
The leader for me would probably be, well, I would have said as of probably 2-3 weeks ago, Ablett for sure. I've currently got him leading by 5 at the moment. Don't think he'll poll yesterday's match. But with Watson being ruled out for about 5 weeks or so, it's going to help his cause, because I had Watson in second place. And as well, I think Dangerfield, he was a bit of a danger, you could say.
Oh, wow.
Don't ruin my moment.
All right.
And yeah, with Dangerfield being ruled out possibly for 1 to 3 weeks, again, could cement his chances of going and getting a second Brownlow. With the top 5, I've got, I'll go through them. Got Gaza on 23. This is before this round, by the way. Gaza on 23, Watson on 18, Swan on 15, Mitchell on 15 and Pendles on 15. But of course he will go. I think he was best on ground on Friday night, so he should catapult up into second place. So that's what I've got at the moment.
So Pendlebury's your... Ablett's your favourite. Who's your smoky to win at the moment?
I would say either Mitchell or Pendlebury.
Yeah. I've been saying Mitchell for the past 3 years.
I know you
think
have.
it's his year this year.
Well, he's finished second twice now, hasn't he?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
In now controversial circumstances.
Yeah.
Which
Exactly right.
he could have a Brownlow, but we're not sure on that, so I think...
We won't speculate.
we won't speculate at all.
Can Cochin still win it?
No, I don't think he can. He's out of the race now, I think. I've only actually got him on 4 votes so far.
I think his season hasn't sort of produced standout games in a way. I think he's had other teammates around him, and I think his input has been, less scoreboard. I think has he kicked a goal yet, Cochin? I think he has.
I think he has, yeah, maybe.
But I don't think he's had that sort of impact where he's kick goal and then he's score assist. I think he's been more. I don't want to say in and under, but obviously it sort of varies whether in and under players get noticed by umpires. But I don't feel that he's had the same impact. Obviously, he's got a very high standard to live up to.
Cochin's kicked 3 goals this year.
3 goals. So obviously, he's not hitting the scoreboard as much and not getting that attention. That
He started the season well in the first couple of games, 2-3 games, and then of course there was rumours that he had a knee problem. Then of course he missed a game or two there, and he's really fallen off. So I think it's past him.
So that's 3 goals compared to 21 last year as well. Cochin.
It's a big start. Yeah.
Have you got Cochin leading for Richmond though?
No, I've got Delidio, who's not really a renowned bowler, leading at the moment on 13, and then Martin on 7.
I think this will be more of a novelty question, but
the D's?
No. D's as well, but GWS other than Callum. Hopefully, it's someone else other than Callum Ward.
Callum Ward, I haven't even got on a vote. I've got Shield on 2, Cameron on 2, and Devon Smith on 1.
That's extreme novelty there. How about Melbourne?
The D's. Here we go.
Nathan Jones will bust.
Yes, Nathan Jones. I think he's probably their best player by far, and I got him on 3.
What about Essendon, apart from Watson?
Yeah, what about stroking your goatee there?
Stroking my goatee.
would it be Dyson Heppel? Stanton?
Let's have a guess. Go around.
I'll go Heppel.
Yeah?
No, I don't know.
I'm going to shoot in the dark and say Bell Chambers.
No, it's Heppel there. Yeah, Heppel on 6. With Stanton, though. He's equal with Stanton.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got a doubly right.
Okay, let's try and get some other things right. Now...
Well, you can't get this tip wrong, can we?
I hope not. We've got Sydney playing GWS at 1 o'clock at the SCG. This should be pretty straightforward, shouldn't it?
I would have thought so, but GWS, in round 1, I think Sydney were very obviously coasting, but still it was their second lowest losing margin of the year. I think, they came within 40 points or so, I believe. So, they're doing okay. They did okay against Sydney last time, and I think, Phil Davis announced, I think, a couple of days ago that he says GWS can win this game, and they'll go into the game not expecting, but realistically believing that they stand a very good chance of winning. And I think off recent form, I think there is an outside chance. I think the way they address games against Geelong, the way they came so close against the Dogs last week, I think there's a big fire in the belly of GWS that they can come out firing, and it'll be interesting to see how they especially start the game.
I think what you mentioned about coasting will probably happen today. Sydney play West Coast at Patterson Stadium next week, and we know that West Coast are trying to make the 8, so I think that'll be a really tough contest. So, in my opinion, I think Sydney will probably just take the foot off the pedal today and just sort of just go with the flow. And I think it won't be a blowout, but it will definitely be a convincing win.
It's funny you mentioned the Sydney West Coast game next week at Patterson's, because that was the game in my mind in which Sydney really put their foot on the gas last year. It was about round 16 or round 17. They won by something like 10 goals, and West Coast at that stage were, I think, first on the ladder, and Sydney were sitting behind them in second, and that was the moment then that they decided to put their full tilt, and the players were starting to play at full potential, and obviously their injury list, probably bar Gary Rowan and a couple of others who had niggles here and there.
Who's playing today as well?
He's coming back?
Yeah, he's off the rehab list and is playing the reserves.
Do you think he'll... Oh, reserves.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were playing for the team. Sorry, I haven't looked at the team sheet yet. So, basically Sydney?
Yeah, Sydney. I think by 50 points. I'm not tipping a blowout.
Yeah, I'm going to say Sydney by about that as well.
Moving to Etihad Stadium, 3:20. God, I hate this time slot. Essendon versus the Western Bulldogs. Jared Grant is back playing his first game in a while. He's named at full forward, and from what I hear...
I'm tipping Essendon just off that.
Just off that, yeah, I know, but he's been obviously disappointing, but do you think he's any chance to salvage what obviously he seemed to be a highly touted under-18s player? What's gone wrong?
Well, I don't know. He was one of those highly touted prospects that really has failed to deliver. I think there was a couple from that draft. I think he was picked, behind Cale Morton, and we know what's happened to him. And I think, he just hasn't lived up to his potential. He's not doing that great in the reserves, but I think, we'll see how he addresses the opportunity today, because he's got a big one to, probably save his career almost. It's a very important game for him.
Yeah, just some of these outs for the Bulldogs: Cordy, Stringer, Johannesson, McRae. Obviously, some of them are a bit sore, but at the moment, from what I've seen, they've put Addison and Picken back in, so they're looking to...
Picken's playing his 100th.
Yeah, there's a bit more experience in the team. Does anyone think that minus Watson, and obviously this is not giving Zaharakis and obviously those Essendon players who were fantastic last week in the midfield when Watson went down, do you think there's any chance the Bulldogs midfield, which is their strength, could at any point challenge Essendon today?
If Griffin has a blinder, yes.
Yeah.
I think not exclusively if Griffin has a blinder. I think we know how good the Dogs are as a contested ball side, and they do regularly beat teams in that regard. But it's how they transition it to the outside. I think losing players like Johannesson and McRae, who are probably two of their better outside users, I think that's really going to hurt them. And Essendon will, they'll counter that. Players like Stanson, and he's probably not 100% fit, but he should have a good game. I think someone like Heppel as well. So. The Dogs should win the contested ball, but from there again, it's tough.
Yeah, I think general consensus is Essendon will win that last game. 4:40, the Derby. I'm not sure what it's called. Who's winning this and by how much? Because we've got to go. We've run overtime as we usually do.
Morton's playing, debuting.
Yeah, I'm thinking Freo.
Therefore, they should win.
I have this feeling that West Coast are going to win, so I'm going to say by 3 points West Coast.
Now, the derbies are often very unpredictable. Both teams live for it, and West Coast, I think they really do have a point to prove. I think against a top 4 team like Freo, and especially to salvage some finals chances. I think West Coast will really come out firing. If they don't, it's probably season over. So I think they'll fight hard in the midfield. I think. They'll run it hard down the ground, and I think if they can break Freo's defence, anything could happen.
For me, the coaching stat: Lions 7, Worsfold 3. I think, especially the last 2 times, Lion has managed to press West Coast, and they've just faltered under the pressure. So I'm sticking with Fremantle.
Yeah, I reckon Freo will win as well.
Yeah, go with Freo.
Yeah, Freo.
So on that note, I think that's another show. That's another week. What do we need to plug, because I'm totally lost?
Well, we need to plug, first of all, the Twitter. So make sure you follow Bound for Glory on Twitter, and also Bound for Glory News with the number 4 on Twitter, and also like us on Facebook, and also make sure you visit Bound for Glory News with all of the latest AFL opinions, Rising Stars information, and Fantasy HQ, and we've got a lot of articles regarding multicultural round as well.
There's a lot of good interviews there, so from last week, and I think there might be a few more coming, I'm not sure, but even if there isn't, there's a few there from last week to check out, still up. We've been Bound for Glory. You're listening to 90.7 FM. This is Sin. That is all.
I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?
See you later, you odd-shaped freak.